The morning lights of a small American diner glowed red and yellow, calm and ordinary.
I'm scared.
A tired man sat with his coffee, a German shepherd resting at his feet.
I can't breathe.
Then a homeless young woman burst inside, breathless, eyes burning with fear.
Protect you.
Promise?
"Don't drink," she cried.
Thank you so much.
The room froze.
Very welcome.
The dog stirred.
Yeah.
Something terrible was hidden in plain sight. What followed wasn't chaos. It was a rescue shaped by courage, instinct, and God's quiet hand. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe miracles still come through unexpected souls, subscribe and stay with us. Morning pressed lightly against the windows of the roadside diner. Pale winter sun sliding across red vinyl booths and yellow trim, turning everything briefly warm before the cold crept back in. Jack Carter sat alone at the small table by the glass, shoulders slightly hunched inside a faded olive jacket that had once belonged to a better version of his life. At 35, he still carried the unmistakable frame of a former Navy SEAL. Broad shoulders, dense muscle held together by discipline rather than vanity, but the sharpness had softened at the edges. His dark hair was cut short out of habit, not regulation anymore, and a rough shadow of stubble traced a jaw that looked like it had clenched through more than one kind of war. Jack's eyes were calm, observant, the kind that measured rooms without appearing to, shaped by years when a missed detail meant someone didn't come home. He wasn't hungry. He rarely was. Breakfast was a ritual, not a pleasure, something solid to anchor the day before it drifted into uncertainty. In front of him sat a chipped white mug of coffee and a paper-wrapped sandwich he hadn't opened. Under the table, stretched along the heater vent with practiced economy of space, lay Max. Max was a 6-year-old German shepherd, black and tan, with a thick coat dulled slightly by age and weather, but still strong along the shoulders and chest. His ears stood tall, never fully at rest, and his amber eyes tracked movement with quiet intent. He had been a working dog once. An injury had ended that chapter, but it hadn't erased the posture or the purpose. Max didn't beg. He didn't fidget. He guarded, even now, as if the world still required it. Jack loved him with the kind of devotion that didn't need words. Max was the one constant when jobs disappeared, when nights were spent in Jack's old pickup with blankets pulled tight against the cold. Whatever Jack had left, Max got half, sometimes more. The diner hummed with soft, unremarkable life. A woman behind the counter, Sarah, according to her name tag, moved slowly but steadily, wiping surfaces with the muscle memory of someone who'd done this work for decades. She was in her early 50s, tall and a little stooped from long shifts. Auburn hair dyed too many times and pulled into a loose ponytail. Her skin was pale and freckled, her eyes tired but kind, the kind of woman who remembered regulars even when she forgot what day it was. Two men laughed near the soda machine. Grease popped behind the counter. Everything felt normal in that fragile way Jack had learned never to trust. He lifted the coffee mug, breathing in the bitter steam when the door slammed open. Cold air rushed in first, sharp and unwelcome, followed by a young woman who looked like she had run through the night without stopping. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her coat hung off her narrow frame, frayed at the cuffs, stained with dirt and old rain. Her dark hair was tangled, pulled back with a broken elastic, strands clinging to her cheeks. Her face was pale beneath grime, eyes wide and shining with a fear that hadn't cooled into panic yet. It was too focused for that. She didn't look around. She didn't hesitate. "Don't drink!" she screamed, voice cracking as it tore through the diner. "Don't touch it," Time stuttered. A cup fell. Someone cursed softly. Sarah froze mid-wipe, cloth hanging uselessly from her hand. Max was on his feet instantly, not barking, not lunging, just a low vibrating growl that rolled out of his chest as his body shifted between Jack and the table, nose lifting, nostrils flaring. Jack stood so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. His training moved him before his thoughts caught up, one hand coming up instinctively, the other lowering toward Max's collar. The young woman stumbled forward, grabbing the edge of Jack's table as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. Her gaze locked onto the mug. Her lips trembled. "Please," she whispered hoarsely. "Don't." Up close, Jack saw the details that mattered. The bruised hollows under her eyes. The way her hands shook. Not from cold, but exhaustion. This wasn't a prank. This was a warning dragged in on bare nerve. "I'm Jack," he said quietly, lowering himself to her level. His voice was steady, practiced, gentle in the way that came from years of calming frightened people. "You're safe. What's your name?" Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then her knees buckled. Jack caught her before she hit the floor, one arm bracing her shoulders, the other steadying her head. She weighed almost nothing. Max stepped closer, positioning himself protectively, ears forward, eyes burning toward the table. "Call an ambulance," Jack said, louder now. Sarah snapped back into motion, fumbling for the phone beneath the counter. As Jack adjusted his grip, his elbow brushed the table. The coffee mug tipped. Max lunged, not at the girl, not at anyone, but at the cup. He knocked it hard with his snout, sending it crashing to the tile. Coffee splashed outward, steaming. Max recoiled immediately, sneezing sharply, growl deepening into something unsettled. Wrong. Jack froze. Max did not react like that to heat. He reacted like that to threats. Jack's gaze flicked from the spilled coffee to the untouched sandwich, then back to the young woman in his arms. His heart didn't race. It tightened. Cold. Focused. This wasn't random. This wasn't desperation. This was intent. The girl stirred, eyes fluttering open. She stared up at him, panic compressing into something harder, steadier. "Did you stop?" she whispered. "Did you drink it?" "No," Jack said. "You stopped me." Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by fear again. Her gaze darted past Jack's shoulder, toward the back of the diner. Jack followed it. Through the side corridor, a man was leaving. He moved with easy confidence, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal jacket that didn't belong in a place like this. His hair was slicked back neatly, beard trimmed close, his expression smooth, almost bored. As he reached the door, his sleeve rode up just enough for Jack to see it, a small anchor tattoo on his wrist. The man disappeared into the morning. Jack tightened his hold on the girl as sirens grew closer outside. Max stood rigid at his side, eyes fixed on the doorway, tail low, body coiled. Whatever had just walked out of that diner had chosen him. And whatever this girl had heard, or smelled, had been dangerous enough to send her running barefoot into a room full of strangers to save a man she'd never met. Jack looked down at the spilled coffee soaking into the tile, at Max's tense posture, at the fear still burning behind the girl's eyes. For the first time in a long while, Jack Carter felt that familiar pull deep in his chest, the sense that a quiet life had just been taken off the table. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and weak coffee, a scent Jack Carter had learned to associate with waiting rather than relief. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright for the hour, washing the color from everything they touched. Jack sat on a plastic chair outside the treatment room, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped as if he were holding himself together by habit alone. At his feet, Max lay with his head up, amber eyes alert, ears flicking at every passing footstep. The young woman, Emily, the nurse had said, lay on a narrow bed just beyond the half-open door. She looked even smaller now, wrapped in a gray blanket that smelled faintly of bleach. Her dark hair had been brushed back from her face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a thin scar near her left eyebrow, old and poorly healed. She couldn't have been more than 21. Life had carved her early. A paramedic named Lisa had brought her in. Lisa was in her late 30s, broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and blonde hair pulled into a tight braid that never loosened, no matter how long the shift. She moved with the brisk certainty of someone who didn't waste motion or sympathy. Dehydration, exhaustion, she'd said. No drugs, no alcohol, just running on fumes. She'd looked at Jack for a long second, then at Max. Dog's a good one, she added, as if it mattered. Jack nodded. It did. Emily stirred, eyelids fluttering. Jack stood immediately and moved to her side, careful not to startle her. Max rose with him, placing himself between the bed and the door, not aggressive, just present. Emily's eyes opened and found Jack's face with startling speed. "You didn't drink it," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Jack replied. "You stopped me." Her shoulders sagged with relief so sharp it looked like pain. She swallowed, throat working. "Good," she whispered, "because that's how they wanted it." Jack pulled a chair closer and sat, keeping his voice low. "Emily," he said, testing the name gently, "I need you to tell me what you know. Not everything. Just the part that made you run." She hesitated, eyes drifting toward the window as if expecting someone to be there. "I sleep behind places like that," she said finally. "Near the loading doors. Warm air leaks. Trucks come early. People talk when they think nobody's listening." Her hands trembled beneath the blanket, not with fear now, but with effort. They were laughing. Two men. One smelled sweet, like candy, burnt candy, and metal. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. "Burnt sugar," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "On the cup," she said. "Not the food. The cup." He touched it with gloves, but the smell stayed. "I didn't know who you were. I just knew. It was wrong." Max huffed softly, a sound Jack had learned meant agreement. Jack reached down and brushed the fur between Max's ears, grounding himself. "You did the right thing," he said. "You saved my life." Emily's mouth twisted, unsure whether to accept the weight of that. "They said the morning would end early," she whispered, "that it would look like nothing." The words landed with precision. Jack had heard variations of them before, back when mornings ended in gunfire and paperwork came later. He stood and stepped into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket. It was old, screen cracked, but it worked. He scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in years. Lena Brooks answered on the second ring. "Jack Carter," she said, voice sharp but not unkind. "I was wondering when you'd stop pretending you wanted a quiet life." Lena was early 40s, tall and wiry, with close-cropped black hair and a thin scar tugging the corner of her mouth downward, giving her a perpetually skeptical expression. Years in federal investigations had honed her instincts into something almost surgical. Jack trusted her because she didn't believe in coincidences. "There was an attempt," Jack said, "at a diner. Coffee, not food." There was a pause. "You okay?" "I am," he said, "because a girl wasn't." "Where are you?" Jack told her. She arrived 20 minutes later, plain jacket, no badge on display, eyes already mapping the space. She listened as Emily spoke again, softer now, steadier. Lena didn't interrupt. She never did. When Emily finished, Lena nodded once. "This matches," she said to Jack outside the room. "You asking questions about falsified inspections stirred up something ugly. Paper clean, product dirty. Removing you simplifies their math." Jack exhaled slowly. The man with the anchor tattoo left the diner. Lena's eyes sharpened. "Anchor," she repeated. "That's not decoration. That's affiliation." By the time Emily was cleared to leave, dusk had crept up the windows. Lena arranged temporary shelter and a hot meal. Emily resisted at first, eyes darting. "They watch places like that," she said, "where people go when they're scared." Jack made a decision. "Come with me," he said. "Just tonight." He drove an old pickup that rattled when it idled, heat unreliable but present. Max settled in the back seat, watching the road through the rear window like a sentry. Jack's place was a small room above a closed hardware store, cheap and drafty, but clean. He made soup from a can and cut bread carefully, as if the act itself mattered. Emily ate slowly, as if relearning trust. "You're not scared," she said, watching Jack. "I am," he replied. "I just don't let it drive." Later, when the city quieted, Jack lay awake on the narrow bed, boots lined neatly by the door. Max slept on the floor beside him, one ear tilted toward the hallway. Jack stared at the ceiling and saw again the man's wrist, the anchor, the casual confidence. He understood then that they wouldn't stop because they'd failed once. They escalated the next morning. Emily woke to a buzzing phone Lena had given her. Unknown number. One message. "Tell him to stop." Emily's hands shook as she read it. She showed Jack without a word. By noon, Lena called. "They took someone," she said. "An older woman from a shelter near the rail yard. Matches Emily's description of family." Emily crumpled, soundless, the way people do when the ground disappears. Jack caught her, steadying her shoulders. Max pressed his head into her knee, warmth and weight anchoring her to the room. "This is leverage," Lena said. "They think fear will quiet you." Jack's jaw set. "It won't." He looked at Emily, then at Max. "We don't chase," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "We let them think they're winning." That afternoon, Jack returned to the diner. Same table, same mug, same posture. He let the city see him be predictable. Max lay at his feet, calm as stone. Behind the counter, Sarah watched him with worried eyes, auburn hair slipping loose from its tie. "You okay, honey?" she asked softly. "Fine," Jack said. It was a lie he used carefully. From the corner of his eye, he saw a new man wiping down the soda machine. Younger, pale, shaved head. He moved like someone wearing a costume. When he walked, his shoes clicked once too loud on the tile. Jack didn't look at him. He lifted the mug, breathed in the steam, and set it down untouched. Across town, Emily sat with Lena, replaying sounds and smells, mapping places she'd learned to survive by noticing. She pointed to a spot on a map near the tracks. "They like places with back doors," she said, "where nobody looks long." Jack waited. Max watched. Somewhere between routine and silence, the trap began to take shape. And the people who thought mornings were harmless were about to learn how wrong they were. Morning returned to the diner the way it always did, quietly and without apology. Sunlight slid across the plastic tables and warmed the red vinyl booths just enough to soften their cracks. Jack Carter arrived at the same hour, took the same seat by the window, and ordered the same coffee he did not intend to drink. To anyone watching, he looked like a man clinging to routine, because he had nothing else left. At 35, Jack had learned that routine was not comfort. It was camouflage. He sat straight-backed, shoulders squared by old muscle memory, his worn jacket zipped halfway against the chill. The faint lines around his eyes came not from age, but from vigilance, carved during years when sleep was earned in fragments and peace was temporary. He kept his hands visible on the table, calm and unthreatening, the posture of a man who had learned that stillness could be louder than fear. At his feet lay Max. The German shepherd rested on his side, head on his paws, appearing relaxed to the casual glance. But his ears tracked everything, every step, every clink of cutlery, every door opening and closing registered in the quiet alertness of a dog that had once been trained to read rooms the way others read maps. His coat, black and tan and thick against the cold, caught the light as his chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths. Max was 6 years old, past the age of reckless energy, firmly in the phase of measured patience. Jack trusted that patience more than he trusted most people. Behind the counter, Sarah moved with her usual rhythm. She glanced at Jack more often than she meant to, worry pulling faint lines across her freckled face. She had been serving coffee for nearly 30 years, long enough to sense when something wasn't right, even if she couldn't name it. Her auburn hair was tied back again, but loose strands had already escaped, and her pale hands trembled slightly as she refilled the pot. "You want a refill?" she asked, too quickly. Jack shook his head with a polite smile. "I'm good, Sarah." It was the kind of answer that meant nothing and everything. Across town, Emily sat in the passenger seat of Lena Brooks's unmarked sedan, knees drawn up, hands tucked into the sleeves of a borrowed sweater. The sweater was soft and too big, pale blue against her dark hair, and it smelled faintly of laundry soap and something floral. She hadn't worn clean clothes like this in a long time. The unfamiliar comfort made her restless. Lena drove without music, eyes scanning traffic, mind working several steps ahead. In daylight, she looked less severe than she had the night before. Tall and lean, her movements economical, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had learned not to raise her voice unless it mattered. The scar at the corner of her mouth pulled downward when she concentrated, lending her a permanent look of skepticism that had served her well. "You don't have to be right about everything," Lena said gently, breaking the silence. "Just about enough." Emily nodded, staring out the window. "I am," she said. "About this." They stopped near the rail yard, a place the city pretended not to see. Rusted tracks cut through cracked asphalt, and old warehouses hunched like tired animals along the perimeter. The air smelled of oil and wet metal. Trucks came and went at odd hours, and no one asked too many questions. Emily pointed without hesitation. "There," she said. "The one with the blue door. It hums at night." Lena followed her gaze. The building was unremarkable, paint peeling, windows high and narrow. It was exactly the kind of place that hid in plain sight. "We'll watch," Lena said. "Not rush." Back at the diner, Jack's phone vibrated once in his pocket. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he lifted his coffee mug slightly, inhaled the steam, and set it back down, untouched. Max's ears flicked. A man entered through the front door. Early 30s, shaved head. Pale skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. He wore the diner uniform, but it hung on him wrong, like borrowed clothes. His movements were careful, almost stiff, as if he were afraid of doing something out of order. When he walked, his shoes clicked just a little too loudly on the tile. Jack didn't look at him. He watched the reflection in the window instead. The man moved behind the counter, avoiding Sarah's eyes. He wiped the soda machine twice, then a third time, even though it was already clean. He kept touching his left wrist, rubbing it as if something itched beneath the skin. Jack noted the habit and filed it away. Max lifted his head, nostrils flaring. He didn't growl. He didn't move. He simply watched. Jack finished the coffee ritual without drinking and stood, leaving a few bills on the table. As he turned to go, he caught the man's reflection again. Their eyes met for half a second. The man looked away first. Outside, the cold bit sharper. Jack walked to his truck without hurry, climbed in, and sat with his hands on the wheel. Only then did he pull out his phone. "They've placed someone," he texted Lena. "New. Nervous. Watching me." The reply came seconds later. "We see movement near the warehouse. You're doing exactly right." Jack drove away slowly, letting the diner recede in his mirrors. Max settled in the passenger seat, gaze fixed forward, body relaxed but ready. Jack exhaled, feeling the familiar balance settle into place. He wasn't chasing, he was waiting. That night, Lena and two plainclothes agents watched the warehouse from a distance. No lights, no sirens, just observation. Near midnight, a van arrived. No markings. Its engine idled while a man unlocked the blue door and disappeared inside. Minutes later, the door opened again. A woman was brought out. She was small, stooped, wrapped in a coat that swallowed her frame. Silver hair escaped a loose bun, catching the light as she stumbled. Even from afar, Lena could see the stiffness in her movements, the way pain shaped her posture. The woman was alive. Lena lowered the binoculars and let out a slow breath. "We have confirmation," she said into her phone. "She's there." Across town, Jack sat on the edge of his narrow bed, boots lined neatly against the wall. Emily sat on the floor, back against the couch, knees drawn to her chest. Max lay between them, a quiet bridge. "They took her because of me," Emily said softly. Jack shook his head. "They took her because they thought fear would work." Emily looked up at him, eyes rimmed red but steady. "It doesn't," she said. "It wasn't defiance. It was fact." Jack reached down and rested his hand on Max's head, fingers sinking into familiar fur. "Tomorrow," he said, "we keep everything the same." Emily frowned. "That's it." "That's the hardest part," Jack replied. "Doing nothing while everything in you wants to act." Emily nodded slowly. She understood waiting. Survival had taught her that much. The next morning, Jack returned to the diner again. Same seat, same coffee, same calm. The shaved-head man was there, more confident now, moving faster, watching less. He believed the threat had landed. He believed fear had done its job. Behind the counter, Sarah leaned closer when she poured the coffee. "You sure you're okay?" she whispered. Jack met her eyes just for a moment. "I will be." Max lay at his feet, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow. The room hummed with ordinary life. Somewhere behind the walls, plans tightened like knots, and somewhere near the tracks, a door with peeling blue paint waited. The morning passed without incident. Jack paid and left. The man watched him go and didn't follow. That was the confirmation Jack needed. Because when hunters stopped watching, it meant they were getting ready to clean up. The morning Jack chose was deliberate. Dawn had a way of making liars careless. Light softened hard edges, convinced people they were safe simply because the world looked ordinary again. Jack arrived at the diner just as the first customers filtered in, coats half-zipped, eyes still fogged with sleep. He took his usual seat by the window, placed his hands flat on the table, and ordered coffee in the same quiet voice he always used. At 35, Jack Carter understood patience as a discipline, not a virtue. His face showed little, but inside, every sense was awake. The years in uniform had taught him that the most dangerous moment wasn't the breach or the chase. It was the pause right before, when people assumed the threat had passed. Max lay at his feet, stretched out in the familiar patch of warmth beneath the table. To the untrained eye, the German shepherd looked asleep, his black and tan coat catching the amber glow of the rising sun. But his ears shifted at every sound, and his amber eyes tracked reflections in the glass with quiet precision. 6 years old, seasoned by work and injury, Max had learned restraint the hard way. He moved only when it mattered. Behind the counter, Sarah poured coffee with hands steadier than she felt. Her auburn hair was pinned back neatly today, freckles standing out against pale skin flushed by the heat of the grill. She smiled at customers out of habit, but her eyes flicked to Jack more than once. Something about his stillness unsettled her. "You sure you don't want cream?" she asked softly, setting the mug down. "I'm good," Jack said. It was the same answer. It always was. Near the soda machine, the shaved-head man from the day before wiped down the counter again. His name tag read Caleb, though it looked freshly pinned, the edges too sharp. He was in his early 30s, lean, pale, with a nervous way of moving that suggested he was constantly measuring himself against the room. He kept rubbing his left wrist, as if reminding himself of something he couldn't afford to forget. Jack didn't watch him directly. He watched the window. Outside, a delivery truck idled in the alley. The back door of the diner opened briefly, then shut again. Max's nostrils flared, drawing in scents layered too precisely to be accidental. He shifted his weight, then settled. Across town, Emily sat in the back seat of Lena Brooks's car, knees bouncing despite her effort to stay still. She wore the same borrowed sweater, sleeves pulled down over her hands. Her dark eyes stayed fixed on the street ahead, alert to patterns others missed. Lena sat behind the wheel, posture relaxed, eyes sharp. "This is where he comes back," Emily said quietly. "Not for you, for what he left." Lena nodded. "We're ready." Back at the diner, the room filled with low conversation and clinking plates. Jack lifted his mug, breathed in the steam, and set it down untouched. It was bait, and everyone in the room, except the people who mattered, missed it. The back door opened again. The man with the anchor tattoo stepped inside. Up close, he looked exactly like someone who belonged anywhere. Early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered without bulk, beard trimmed to a precise line that sharpened his angular jaw. His hair was dark, slicked back neatly, and his suit jacket fit as if it had been tailored specifically for movement rather than comfort. He wore confidence, like a uniform. When he smiled at Sarah, it was polite, professional, and entirely empty. "Morning," he said. His voice was smooth, unhurried. "Health inspection follow-up." Sarah stiffened almost imperceptibly. She glanced at the manager, then nodded, stepping aside. The man moved behind the counter with practiced ease, eyes scanning upward for half a second too long. Jack felt the shift before he saw it. The room's hum changed pitch, the way it did before a storm. The man reached up, fingers hooking the edge of a ceiling tile above the prep counter. Dust drifted down, like pale snow. From the narrow space above, he retrieved a small silver USB drive, heavier than it looked, finished with a matte sheen. He turned it once in his hand, checking for damage, then slid it toward the inside pocket of his jacket. That was when Emily's voice cut through the diner. "Don't touch it!" She stood near the door, pale but steady, eyes locked on the man's hand. Conversation stopped. Trays clattered. The man froze, mask slipping just enough to reveal irritation beneath. "What did you say?" he snapped, politeness gone. Emily took a step forward. Her voice didn't waver. "Above you," she said. "You hid it above you." The man swore under his breath and moved fast. Too fast. He turned toward the back door, shoving past Caleb, who flinched and stepped aside without thinking. "Police," Jack said calmly, standing at last. His voice carried authority without volume. "Stop." The man didn't. He bolted through the back door, shoes pounding against concrete. Jack followed, stride long and controlled, Max surging ahead in a blur of black and tan. Outside, the alley narrowed, shadows stretching between dumpsters and loading docks. The man vaulted a low fence with practiced ease and sprinted toward the strip mall beyond. As he ran, he reached into his jacket and hurled the USB toward the storm drain at the edge of the lot. "Max!" Jack shouted. The German Shepherd didn't hesitate. He lunged not at the man, but at the glint of metal skittering across asphalt. His claws scraped sparks as he slid, jaws snapping shut around the drive inches before it vanished into darkness. He skidded to a stop, braced, body low and powerful. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The man glanced back once, eyes burning with frustration, then disappeared between two buildings. Jack slowed, breath steady, heart pounding with a different rhythm now. He knelt beside Max and pried the USB gently from his mouth. "Good," he murmured, clipping Max's collar. "So good." Lena arrived moments later with 2 officers, faces set, movements efficient. She took the drive from Jack's hand, weighing it as if she could feel the truth inside. "This will do," she said. "This will unravel him." Inside the diner, Emily stood shaking but upright, Max's presence still echoing in the room like a held breath. Sarah pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide, auburn hair slipping loose at last. "He came back for it," Emily whispered. "Yes," Jack said, meeting her gaze. "And he underestimated you. And him." Later that afternoon, Lena's team confirmed what they already suspected. The USB contained records, names, dates, payments, threads tying poisoned supply chains to falsified inspections and silenced witnesses. Enough to pull warrants, enough to protect Emily's grandmother. As dusk fell, Lena received the call. "She's alive," she said quietly. "Shaken, but alive. We have her location." Emily sank into a chair, relief breaking through fear in a silent rush of tears. Max rested his head against her knee, warm and solid, as if reminding her she was no longer alone. Jack stood by the window, watching the diner's lights flicker on against the coming night. The trap had closed, not on the man himself, but on the truth he thought he could erase. And for the first time since that barefoot warning shattered an ordinary morning, Jack allowed himself to believe they were finally ahead. The diner woke slowly the next morning, as if it too needed time to believe the danger had passed. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, softer now, warming the red vinyl booths and turning the yellow trim almost gentle. The hum of the refrigerator, the quiet sizzle from the grill, the low murmur of early customers, all of it returned like a held breath finally released. Jack Carter arrived just after 7. He no longer wore the tension of a man bracing for impact. His posture was still straight, his movement still economical, but something had loosened in him. At 35, with lines at the corners of his eyes shaped by long years of vigilance, Jack looked like a man who had carried responsibility until it fit him, and then set part of it down. Max walked at his side, leash loose, head high. The German shepherd's black and tan coat gleamed in the morning light, his gait steady and unhurried. 6 years old now, his muzzle just beginning to silver at the edges, Max had the calm assurance of a dog who knew his place in the world again. He paused briefly at the doorway, ears flicking, then followed Jack inside. Sarah stood behind the counter, already pouring coffee. She looked different today. Her auburn hair was neatly pinned back, freckles bright against rested skin, her shoulders no longer hunched as if expecting trouble. When she saw Jack, she smiled fully, not the polite curve she'd perfected over decades, but something warmer. "You look like you slept," she said. "I did," Jack replied, and realized it was true. He took his usual seat by the window, more out of affection than habit now. Max settled at his feet, stretching out in the patch of sunlight as if it had been waiting for him. Jack ordered coffee, and for the first time in days, lifted the mug and drank. It tasted exactly like it always had, bitter, ordinary, safe. Across the room, Emily hovered near the doorway, uncertain. She wore a clean pink dress Sarah had pressed into her hands the night before, insisting she take it. The fabric was simple and slightly worn, but it fit her, and that mattered. Her dark hair had been brushed and tied back loosely, curls escaping no matter how carefully she tried to tame them. She looked younger like this, though her eyes still held a depth that spoke of nights spent listening instead of sleeping. "You can sit," Sarah told her gently. "He won't mind." Emily approached Jack's table, hands clasped in front of her. "Is it okay?" she asked. Jack smiled, a small, honest thing. "It's your table now, too." She slid into the seat across from him, feet swinging slightly above the floor. Max opened one eye, then thumped his tail once in greeting before settling again. Emily's shoulders relaxed at the sound. Outside, a patrol car rolled past without lights or sirens. Inside, the diner returned to its rhythm. The door chimed again. Detective Lena Brooks entered without ceremony, plain jacket buttoned, dark hair cropped close as always. In daylight, the scar at the corner of her mouth softened her expression instead of sharpening it. She scanned the room quickly, habit ingrained, then allowed herself a rare smile when she spotted Jack. "They're done," she said, stopping at the table. "Every thread." Jack didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. Lena wouldn't say it unless she meant it. "And her grandmother?" Emily asked, voice tight but hopeful. Lena nodded. "Safe. Shaken, but safe." The door chimed again, almost on cue. Evelyn Moore stepped inside slowly, as if unsure the floor would hold her. She was small and stooped, silver hair pulled into a loose bun that refused to stay neat, wisps catching the light. Years of work had bent her fingers with arthritis, and her skin bore the marks of sun and time. But her eyes were bright, sharp with relief and stubborn love. Emily stood so fast her chair scraped back. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around Evelyn's waist. Evelyn's breath caught, then she held Emily tightly, one hand pressing against the girl's back as if to confirm she was real. "My brave girl," Evelyn whispered, voice thin but unbroken. Jack watched, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. Max lifted his head, ears forward, observing the reunion with quiet approval. They sat together then, Emily and Evelyn on one side of the booth, Jack across from them. Sarah brought coffee refills and a plate of toast without being asked. She lingered a moment, eyes soft. "On the house," she said, and moved away before anyone could argue. Lena stayed only long enough to finish her coffee. "Paperwork waits," she said, standing, "but this part doesn't." She nodded once to Jack, then to Emily. "You did good." When she left, the diner seemed to exhale again. Later that morning, Jack walked Max outside while Emily and Evelyn finished their breakfast. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of a day that would not demand anything terrible. Jack leaned against the hood of his old pickup, hands in his pockets, watching Max sniff the edge of the sidewalk with professional interest. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Short, direct. "They want you." Jack frowned slightly and typed back. For what? Supply chain oversight. Training. Someone who knows what to look for and won't look away. Jack stared at the screen for a long moment. He thought of the jobs that came and went, the nights in his truck, the way Max had always curled close for warmth. He thought of the questions he'd asked that had led to all of this. He typed back, slowly. When? That afternoon. By the time the sun dipped lower, Jack sat in a quiet office across town, listening to an offer that didn't promise wealth, but did promise purpose. He accepted without ceremony. Some things didn't need negotiation. When he returned to the diner at dusk, Emily and Evelyn were waiting for him by the door. Emily held Max's leash, pride flickering across her face. "They said there's a place for us," she said. "Temporary, but safe." Jack nodded. "That's a start." Evelyn reached for his hand, her grip warm despite the tremor. "Thank you," she said simply. Jack shook his head. "You did the hard part." Outside, the sky had turned the color of fading fire. The diner lights glowed behind them, red and yellow against the coming night, no longer ominous, just familiar. Jack locked his truck and glanced back once at the window by his old table. For a moment, he saw himself there as he had been, hungry, cautious, braced for impact. Then the image faded, replaced by something quieter. Max lay down near the door, head on his paws, tail thumping once against the concrete. He had done his work. They walked away together, steps unhurried, the night opening ahead of them not as a threat, but as a promise. And in a place built on routine, an ordinary morning had become a beginning. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through a warning whispered at the right moment, a loyal dog who refuses to look away, or a stranger who chooses courage instead of comfort. God often works through ordinary lives, through people who are tired, broken, or overlooked, through small acts of love that stop great evil. In our daily lives, we may never know how close we are to changing someone's fate, a kind word, a moment of attention, the courage to speak up. These are not small things. They are how miracles begin. If this story moved your heart, share it so someone else can feel hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel if you believe that light is stronger than darkness. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and remind you that even in ordinary mornings, He is still working.